you're like the family entertainment, set it up, everything, whatever happens. It's like my mom was a partier and always planned parties. So I learned at an early age to help set it up, organize it, whatever. So now my daughter is passed down to her because, like you were saying, you were the caretaker of your mother.
Yeah.
So was I. I watched her get beat. As soon as he was done, I would go comfort her.
Yeah.
And then I became a survivor of domestic violence,
Yeah.
basically, and my daughter now. But now it's funny because my daughter, I hate doing it. I get so angry, but I should be happy and pleasant about it, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm angry because she depends on me to go find that, set up that tablecloth, da-da-da-da-da. And then my daughter, if I can't do it, I know my daughter knows because she tagged along with me to learn where things were in the house. And then now her daughters.
Yeah.
So it's like, now I can turn around and say, daughter, be happy when you do this. Don't be angry. This is our family.
Yeah.
You know, whether I'm under the influence or not, because I'm a recovering addict, I was able to say things like that, even though I had hate in my face, because I'm trying my best.
Yeah.
She's 31 now.
And that's the renegotiation process. And you know what? Our Native people were so wise because they said from the age of 20 on into 40, you're renegotiating the relationship. That's why we had all the ceremonies. Because your child is an adult now. But so we have to stop and examine, am I treating her like a little girl by thinking that she doesn't know how to set the table?
Yeah.
So there's an element of codependency there, and there's an element of not thinking that individual can't do that. And so they might think that. Because, and we can do some group exercises here to get that point across, because one of the things that strong women do is we become martyrs. And remember, the only martyr, good martyr, is a dead one. Because we think we have to do everything, right? And we don't know that it can be done until we stop. So that's hard because it gives me a sense of worthiness. Like, you know, when ceremony time comes, it's like, oh, the soup, I gotta do that. I'm not the only one that can make soup. So I have to be able to relinquish my role as soup maker. That's hard, yes.
Both of my parents are mentally ill. I was the first one. They were incapable of taking care of children. So I was adopted out when I was very young. I don't really remember how young, but I was taken in for abuse and neglect and had tuberculosis. I think I was about 2.5 to 3 years old.
You had TV when you were 2?
Yes. But I always resented my parents because they didn't raise me, my bio parents. But my sisters and I were the unwanted children. Nobody wanted us. And that was always made perfectly clear. So we always grew up with that feeling. I have the feeling that our family put the D in dysfunction, capital D, italicized. So it was not a happy childhood at all. The only thing that I knew when I was small was that someone asked me what I was, and the only answer I could come up with was I was Catholic. Period. I didn't know anything about being Indian. I hardly knew anything about being myself. But I did know that I was unwanted. The abuse that I grew up with whenever I saw my father was unbelievable. There was alcoholism. That was, I guess at that time, people trying to cope. But the rage that my sisters went through was one turned into a meth addict and the other turned into a rageaholic. But with my rage, I took it out on myself. And I became a suicide victim at an early age. But as you can see, I did not succeed. But it's been a a lifetime of trauma, without a doubt. Now I'm 66, that's in 2014. So looking back over the cliff is like looking back over the Grand Canyon of life
Right.
and seeing all the things that you're talking about, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But having had a lot of counseling, I can see what everybody was talking about. My road is a little different, but very much the same. I come from one parent being white and one being Indian, and neither side are able to accept one another. So I just say that I'm half Indian and half savage.
Thank you.
By definition.
Thank you.
And when I grew up, I was always reminded that I was really never good enough by the white people who raised me, that I was related to. But I made it to this age,
Yeah.
looking back.
What a warrior woman you are.
Oh, wow.
Yes, really. And when you think about it, there's, all of us have, I listened to, last week I was listening to a little 14-year-old girl. She had a story like yours. She had these little kids on, and then she had her, her skinny pants. She's sitting there. Such a journey, such pain. And she's sitting there, she's got these braids in, real nice braids. She's sitting there, and then the bell rings. She takes a big breath, she shakes it off. She said, I gotta go. And then she runs down the hallway and I think, oh my gosh, she's only like 14 years old, and look at she's carrying like what you did all your life. And so when we hear these stories like that, I think it's even more crucial that we have the sisterhood, because there's so many of us that are in that and we don't talk to each other. We need to hear these stories, and when we hear them, then we can breathe. And with your story, I want to tell you a story, and then we're going to take a break, take about a 5-minute break. I want you to realize that, and you already know this, that I used to think that Native people had the monopoly on trauma and rage. I thought we had it all. I thought we owned it. And then I realized that, holy smokes, there's not just red rage, there's major white rage, there's black rage, brown rage, yellow rage, and I had an example of white rage. I went into Montana and they asked me to do training for the Forest Service. Can you imagine that? Talking about culture with the Forest Service in Montana. And so I go into, they call them grange halls, and so I went into this little green building and I'm waiting for the Forest Service to arrive, and pretty soon they come in with their steel-toed boots and their uniforms, big tough guys. They all walk in, they stop and they look at me like, oh, is the Indian's going to be talking to me today? All of them stopped. They kind of stopped and sized me up, and then they sat down. And then the next challenge was to get them to get into a circle. Can you imagine that? Get into the Forest Service in a circle. I said, guys, we're going to get into a circle. They looked at me and they said, think so, huh? I said, yeah, we're going to get in a circle. So I get them in a circle finally. And then this man is really internally oppressed. He suffered probably a lifetime like yours. But he was Euro-American. And he came up to me, and when somebody's really, really oppressed, sometimes this is our hero's journey. We have to make sure that we don't act like the oppressor. And him, he was caught in that. So he comes up to me and he wants to be safe. So he comes up and he says, hello there, girl, what are you going to be doing with us today? And I said, well, I'm going to be doing some stories, sharing with you, doing some training. Okay, do you mind if I sit beside you? He wanted me to keep me close to him so he'd be safe. He didn't want me to pick on him, fear of the ordinary. He wanted to make sure that he was going to be safe. He said, can I sit by you? So he was making friends with me, and I said, okay, you can sit beside me. So then I started to get into some of the red rage, the trauma response, which I'm going to do after the break. And all of a sudden, that chair started to move back. I was losing my friend. He started to get behind me, and that chair kept going back. And pretty soon, he lost it. Those of you that have major red rage, maybe those of you that have become really abusive, when that hits, you don't remember, right? It's like you blank out. And all of a sudden, he was sitting here behind me, and he threw his pencil across the floor. And he said, "God damn it, I've had it." And I doubt that he remembers this. He said, "I've had it. I am so goddamn tired of you Indian people whining around. Girl, you don't even know about oppression." He looked at me and he was spitting and he was going like this to me. And he went off completely. And I just sat there. I happened to be sitting down when he did that. I was sitting like back here. And he turned around and he was just going like that. And then all of a sudden he came to. And he went, "Oh." And I looked across and the Forest Service supervisor was looking at me like, he was like, "Oh my God." And then he said, "I'm done. That's it. I've had it." And then because he came out of it, so then he kind of went like this, his body language changed, and he looked down. And everybody looked at me like, what is she going to do now? The only thing I could think of to say is, does anybody else have comments? He said it all, right? He said it all. And so we took a break, and the Forest Service supervisor came up to me and he said, "Faith, I'm so sorry." I said, "Don't be sorry. That's what we're talking about." You know, he's got major red rage. The 4 Colville guys came up to me, and they said, "Oh my God, this is so cool. He is the meanest guy in the world, and that's what he does, and you got to what hurt him." And what he was saying, he said, "You know what a cracker is? You know what a poor white something or other?" He said, "That's where I came from. You Indians don't know how white people were treated in the South." He grew up in Appalachia. So he had the same hurt that all of us had. And I remember his name was Stanley, and the next morning when I came to the workshop, he was in the supervisory office, and that supervisor came out, and I said, "I hope you're not firing him." He said, "No, I'm not going to fire him, but there will be some disciplinary action." He said, "There has to be, because we can't have people." And I said, "Well, do you see why this training is needed?" And of course, the Colville guys in the back were going, "Yay!" Because he was really cruel, and that's that internalized oppression that you were talking about. Because he was hurt, and he put it in himself, and his role was to hurt other people. It's a perfect example of internalized oppression. Okay, let's take about a 5-minute break, and then we're going to go into this trauma response. Bathroom break. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you look up here, this name that I gave this affliction that we have, and I really do believe it's an affliction. Some of you have been courageous enough to say, "Yes, I have this." We probably all have this to some degree. It is the emotional, red rage is the emotional overreaction that Native people have, which has been perpetuated by the impact of generations of trauma, violence, and oppression of a nation. So you see this symbology right here, the stacked grief and trauma. The important thing to remember, and somebody during the break reminded me of this, somebody said, "My kids are just like that," or "My daughter has inherited this." When that happens, we call it secondary trauma. So you might have that way of abrasiveness or domineering way or whatever it is. You did that for self-preservation. So you don't have to shame yourself. It was how you survived. It was doing the best that you could. But the kids take it on, and then you give up the stack, and that's called secondary trauma. So that's where the renegotiation begins, that you have to say, "I don't have to control my children. They have their own lives." And so when we look at this, it's important to know that it is way beyond anger. When we're talking about red rage, we're talking for the throat. We're talking about F you, I'm never going to talk to you again, get out of my way, I don't even want to look at you. You know, you don't even deserve to live, fire that person. It's to that degree. And so when they tell you to go to anger management, it's totally inappropriate, because it's not about anger. It's about pure rage. And you are reacting from something, that injury, the stack over here, all of this injury was a deep, deep erosion on your psyche, and your spirit sometime left. So at that level, you have to realize the individual over here, she's out of the room now, with the precious lady that was talking about when she was giving up her adoption. You could hear that little 2-year-old girl when she's talking. And that little girl needs to come home. And so it may not be to the biological parents, and it may not even be alive anymore, but that would be an example of a spirit calling, that little girl is still somewhere. So we need to bring her home. This red rage creates rageful individuals, nations, and communities, and it difficult for tribes to find common ground. So we want to get involved in the movement, we want to get involved in making it better for our communities, but when we get in a circle and all the good work starts to happen, and then those unresolved traumas that happen over here begin to manifest themselves. We distrust each other. And then we have this big hard front, the tough girls. It's like, you know how we see another native maybe in the airport, or maybe we see them in the community, and we act like we don't see them, right? It's like, oh, there she is, I'm gonna pretend I don't see her. Kind of walk in like this so I don't have to look at her. It's real crazy behavior. Yeah. When you think about it, and then if a car drives up, you know how we used to say that Indian people don't have a lot of direct eye contact? Holy smokes, the way we stare at each other now. Somebody's getting out of that car and trying to figure out who's in there. And then, just all mean looking. And then when they wave at us, what do? We go like this. That's really common behavior, isn't it? And it comes from fear. The only way we know how to make a relationship, and I said it the last time that I came, if somebody in that car went like this, you don't have to make a relationship with that, right? It's like, hey, who do you think you are? Get out of that car. Some kind of relationship building. But that's what we learned is this self-preservation. And sometimes it's real, like the kids say, carried away. Real carried away. So we have to put it in perspective. If this rage goes unrecognized or untreated, it can cause unhealthy problems, addictions. We all talked about that. Some of you have very honestly talked about your addiction that has held you for a number of years and you're willing to give that up. And the inability to cooperate because I'm afraid. I'm really scared that you're going to do me in. And so the companion to that rage is primary fear. This fear that I don't trust you, I've been hurt before, and I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me. Which is really an unfortunate way to live. Because by doing that, I'm trying to control you. I'm trying to control your behaviors. And if you could go to the next one, fine. This is the trauma response, the journey. I think some of you saw that. How many of you here remember this from last time? Even if you've seen it, every time you see it, you're going to think of something else. Because it's going to touch on wherever you are at this point in time. I remember I gave a speech somewhere, it was a keynote, and this woman came up to me and afterwards she said, you know what, Faith? I felt like you were talking about me. And my message is, I am talking about you. Each one of you, I'm talking about the need to look at this mirror. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to hurt each other. We're going to continue to be mean to each other. We can't do that. We have to be able to treat each other like a good relative. My grandma, when I used to hitchhike with her to town in my community, as soon as her other Chapanchis or her cousins would see her, right away they'd come up and they'd say, oh, Chapanchi, it's good that I see you. And then they'd spy me over here, the little grandchild. Oh, Takoja, how are you? Nowadays, we speed up to this period of time and we see them in the community, we'll say, where's your mom? Just mean. What happened to the language? It's the language of rage. It's the language of being pissed off that I don't really care, but I'll ask for your moments. So it's just a transformation of pain. Did you have?
I have a little question about that trauma response.
Yep.
I recently went through a relationship that lasted 2 weeks that ended earlier this week. And this guy told me a bad lie, which I believed for about 6 weeks. He lied about where he lived. And what I'm realizing is I went into the same stages when I found out he lied to me.
Yeah.
That's trauma response, where when he finally fessed up to where he lived, because you date somebody based on what you know of them, right?
Right.
And I know that I had a late reaction to the phone, so I underreacted. And I knew I was angry, but I didn't know what to do. I was really sorry.
Yeah.
And then a day later, because I thought about it a lot, and I realized I am so pissed off.
Yeah, he went right up to Red Rage, which is the top one up
You
there.
know, and disappointed, and I went through all those things. And then I found myself getting depressed, which is pretty much when I broke down. Because I felt like if you start a relationship with a lie, it's, you know, going to continue with
There's
lies.
no way
I
out.
was struck by, because it was to me a big lie, and I, you know, maybe I doubted you, and you lied to me, and abused me, and used me. And I said, never again, and I thought I was a lot smarter this time and wiser. But I am, because guess what, I found it out, and boom, you know, but still, that.
You were willing
reaction-
to trust.
Yeah, I was trying to trust.
Yeah.
you know,
And so you were just being a human being, but unfortunately, that's the world. And I work with the children at home and I say, you have to acknowledge that we live in violent communities. We really have to watch, you have to watch your step. And so let's go through the trauma response. Over here is the shock part. That's the stressor when something happens. In your case, it would be then when you found out that he lied to you. And other situations, domestic violence, the beautiful the woman over here in purple that talked about the little two-year-old when she was given away. Probably some of it you don't remember in your mind, but your spirit, your body remembers the loss. And so that's the stressor that occurred over here. The next stage is immobilization. And for me, it was like, where did my mom go? What did they do with her? Now, the important thing is that sometimes we will stay that way for the rest of our lives. So we may not go on to any of these stages. If I can get out of immobilization, then I move into denial. And then I'll say, gee, somebody made my mom leave. If somebody did this, she didn't do this. Or whatever the situation is. In your case, maybe it would be, oh, he had to do that because, you know, he didn't feel good or something. So I'll become in denial. And then over here, when I get pissed off, I move into red rage, and that's when you gotta be careful, because people are just angry. It's beyond anger. Just get out of my way. Don't even talk. Don't even look at me. That's that red rage part. Anxiety and anger is normal, because we're human beings. We get hurt, we get anxious, but when it goes to rage, it's not. It's entirely unnatural. When I can slowly begin to get out of that, I go into self-doubt to say, okay, I got these people pissed off, I hollered at them, I'm just like always scary. I wonder if I could be nice. I wonder if I could talk like, I wonder if I could be a nice person. I don't know, I'm self-doubt. I'm gonna try it. But I can feel it like within my spirit, like I'm really gonna have to. And the story that I always tell is, I think I told you the last time that I came, I was in Rapid City and I was going into Walmart with my kids, and they're grown up now. So we're going into Walmart, and I think we had one of the grandchildren, and they said, you're kind of scary. You really make the clerks pay if they treat you some kind of way. And we're going to start taking sides with the clerks if you don't behave. And I thought, I was really offended. I said, whatever. And they said, really, you're kind of scary. If somebody treats you some kind of way, then you intimidate them, you humiliate them, and you make them pay. And you have a way of doing that. And that really stunned me. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, you'll figure it out. And then so I was wandering around at Walmart by myself. And then I thought about that, and it really hit me, and I thought, I need some help. So I offered some tobacco to my cousin. She's a counselor, and I trusted her. And she started working with me, and she immediately took me back to when I was about 8 years old. And I was in town. We had back then a Ben Franklin store, and I remember I went back to the toys, and my grandmother was probably in her 80s, and everybody just, Wakan Yuza used to hold her up. Everybody respected her. I mean, she was just an awesome grandma. And I heard this incongruent language in the back of the store, and the clerk was saying, get out of here, you thief. Go on, you dirty Indians. And my little child spirit, I remember I stopped, and I thought, who's he talking to? And then I heard my grandma say, Takoja. She was saying, grandchild. And so I ran to the front of the store, and here that woman was saying, get out of here, you thief. And my mind froze. I was over here. I thought, is she talking to my grandmother? And then my grandmother wanted to protect me, so she said, come on, Taco Jones. And And I was angry. I shot up to Red Rage, and I said, "Don't you talk to my grandma that way." And I started talking to that lady, and my grandma grabbed me by my neck, and then she dragged me out. I was trying to climb over that counter and knock that woman out. But when I looked at that woman, remember those old kind of glasses? Maybe oldsters remember they would go up in wings like that. They had sparkly things. I could see those right now. I could see those glasses, and I thought, I'm gonna hit her, and I was trying to, my grandma dragged me out. So immediately, when she took me back, I knew that was the trauma that was set. I was making all the clerks of the world. Don't you dare cross me because you hurt my grandma. And so in my travels, even last night, my body dropped me off. When I'm going into a hotel, I really have to be careful because that's my red rage point, is don't you dare disrespect me because I just go off. And it sounds silly, but that's an example of hatred. Somebody deeply disrespected my grandma and called her a thief. And so I began to look at that, and so I remember last spring, it popped up again. We went up to the VA Veterans Administration in Hot Springs, South Dakota. And we went up to the hotel, and it was late, and I walked in, same old thing. I walked in, and I had my 2 sons with me, and we were doing a workshop together, and I said, "Good evening, we have a room here." And she didn't answer, she just kind of looked at me and looked at the computer. And she said, "Well, it's kind of late." And I thought, there it is again, I can feel it coming up immediately. And so I took a deep breath, and I thought, okay, I gotta control myself, my sons are with me. We're doing a workshop on red rage. Gotta get a grip here. And so then she just kept saying, "Are you sure you have a room here?" And then I just started to lose it, and I just shut up because I thought and then my older son walked in, well, my younger son walked in, and he saw that look on my face, and it was like, he said, "If he just walked by, he left me for dead." He walked by with a suitcase, and he went around the other way, and then the older son came in, and he said, "Go ahead, I'll take care of it." And so I went around the corner because he knew that I was starting to lose it, and he talked to her in the most kindest voice, and he said, "Ma'am, we're really sorry to bother you this late, but we do have rooms, and we work with the Veterans Administration." As soon as he said VA, she got nicer. It's like, maybe these Indians aren't so bad after all. Maybe they have credibility because they work with the VA. So she got a little bit nicer, and I could not stand it. She was so disrespecting him, and I just stayed down the hallway because I was thinking, don't you talk like that to my son. But I went down the hallway so I didn't have to hear. He got the rooms, and then I just went to my room. The next morning, I heard him out there talking to the clerk. She was gone, and he said, "I'd like to speak to your manager." And the lady said, "Oh, just a minute, he's in the back." So the manager came up, and my son said, "I would like to find out where your head office is, because I have a complaint. We weren't treated very well last night. And she may have been tired, but regardless, your sign up there says customer service. So we're customers, and we would like to be treated like human beings." And so he made the complaint. And I thought, good for him. I wasn't in a place where I could do that. But for his generation, that's what he did. He took it in his own hands and did that. And so we wrote, and we got an apology from the company. I don't know what happened to that woman, but that's an example of over here. That was a primary, and I still deal with I travel a lot, so it's always prevailing. If I go into Montana, South Dakota, some of those areas where they expect that you can treat people like that, it's a continual thing that I have to be aware of. So that's one example. When we get over to self-doubt, that's where I'm at every time I go into the hotel. Because I gotta be a human being, gotta take the high road, I can't be beating hotel clerks up. And the next step down here, depression. You talked about that. When it's like, oh my gosh, this really happened. And that's a big black hole. We've all been in that big black hole. But it is the road to healing. So I do have to go there. If I skip that, I'm lying to myself. I'm back over here at denial. And I'm saying, I don't care. Don't matter. I don't like them anyway. All right. But I need to go there to get better. And so when I finally get better and I'm able to crawl out of that hole, and sometimes I need support. I need to have someone get me out of the basement. And then I go to testing and I think, okay, this this work situation is hard. I know something happened at work, but I'm gonna go ahead and try it. I'm gonna test the water. Or if it's sobriety, you have to be really careful about going to those slippery places. So stay out of those places because you know the outcome of that. But if you go to a place, for example, my sister, she said that when she went into recovery, she couldn't be around cowboy music. She said that she did just, and she's way older than me, but she said George Jones was a killer for her. It's like, she could not listen to that kind of music because it just set her off. And so that's that testing. And then acceptance is that for her, yes, I am an addict. I am an alcoholic. That I have to grieve that because that was my friend. The addiction was my friend, and I'm grieving the loss of that, but I have to let that go. And I have to go. And so this is the whole cycle. Over here, if you're on this side continually, there's more of a possibility of addiction and also red rage. Because I haven't gone past that peak over there. And then in order to get out of that, that original trauma over here has to be tied over here, and I have to re-walk through it. And sometimes I can't do it myself. In your case, with your adoption, what you would have to do is have someone work with you to go back to that little 2-year-old. You need to go visit. And so if you choose to do that, if you're okay with where you're at, that's fine, but you would have to go back over here and to say, I'm gonna go get that little girl. I'm going to sing to her, I'm going to read to her, I'm going to celebrate with her, and maybe a certain time, whenever the time period that you were adopted, maybe it was in January. And what do you remember of Christmas? So you have to do that because there are elements of your spirit that are left behind. And in your situation in the school, there were probably some lonely moments in the school when things were going on.
Yeah. Not only that, too, like, my mom's Irish and Spanish, my dad's Mexican and Chilean, so I had a lot of conflict with that, you know, like stereotyping who I am, and I grew up in Peoria, and I went to a small school out in the country, and the majority was whites and Mexicans, and yeah, that's pretty much the majority, and so we weren't allowed to speak Spanish in school. So I dealt with a lot of racism too. Not only with my own family, like my dad's side, you know, like, I think my uncle one of my uncles is probably being native, but he kind of put down like my mom being Irish, which she went through her. They also had, they were also well, she dealt with her, you know. Yeah, they were slaves too at one time, so, yeah. Oppression, so she dealt with it too. You know, it's like how the Spaniards conquered Mexico one time, and so it's like very confusing.
Layers of racism against each other. Yeah, yeah, because somehow we think that we're better than another race when we both have been oppressed. And I know that happens with African American people in the Native culture. They're really horrible to them. And I don't know why. It's horrible because of the internalized oppression. Yes?
When I was looking at your trauma response chart, see, I can get every level of my life to this thing. But the same thing has been reoccurring to me for like the last, I'd say, 2.5 years. I have this cousin who has 3 children by an ex of mine. And in that alone, that was hard, but I accepted it. And I got to know my relatives through my ex. His children are my relatives now. Yeah, not really close, but to see them and they know who I am. And so my cousin went through all her drinking and the children being misplaced and getting them back and whatever she had to go through. She went back in a 12-step program. And in that program, she was supposed to do something like say you're sorry to people that you hurt.
Make amends.
Right.
Make
And
amends.
so she did this. She went to different people. And the whole time that I knew her as a little girl, because she was a lot younger than me, she was a good little kid, grew up to be a partier and stuff. And I saw that where I was drawn away from it. I still saw it. And she had her children, and I could know. saw her and talked to, tried to get along with her. And get to the point where she has a dance group, and everybody in the community was really appreciating things in her life. And whenever I'd see her, I'd say, "How are you?" And she's like, she didn't have nothing. And I accepted that because, who I was compared to who she was.
Yeah.
Because, I just figured that's the way it's gonna be.
Yeah.
So, it turned out that she's running in sweats, and she's got her dance group, and everybody just thinks she's a very kind, great person. And all these years, when I see her and I talk to her, she'd turn around and she wouldn't even look at me. I mean, and I feel, yeah, that's when I was thinking, I'm in this, stage that shouldn't be. So,
And so
I was over my
where are you in regard down in depression? Over.
well, the aim, I was here.
Okay.
And it turned out that I was over at my friend's house, and I spent like a week or two there, and she had this something going on at the new house, and I said, yes. And I said, I saw someone around the corner. She goes, "That's what I see." I said, "Yeah, someone's sitting there." She goes, "Yeah, the little house." So I said, "Well, I'll sage you for me. I'll sage your house." She said, "Okay." So I saged the house. Prayed. Then I came down. I came back the next week and went all the way up there and down here. And I sat there and I was talking to her and asking how she was, and she said that my cousin had come over the very next day. The very next day, she said that she had talked to her about this thing, and she said, "Well, I've saged all these bad spirits away." So she saged the whole house. And I said, "What? What did she do?" I said, "I just did that." And she's doing that to me. And that's when that hit. That's it. I'm going to tell you how she's been treating me all these years. All these years she's been so kind, and all Miss Dildo, and everybody's so kind to her, and she's so good. And she's been treating me this way. I said, that's not right. So I came back down here and I talked to a spiritual person who was a friend carrier. And I said, I even gave her her name. I said, "Listen, I have a problem with this person. I am emotionally hurt by what she has done to me. Not only did she have me on to do that, I was hurt." So it turned out that this spiritual person said that if she did not conduct herself in a better way, that things would happen. That she would watch it. So I went back and I told my friend that, and everybody just kind of like, don't worry what she's saying. So it turned out that her husband and
Can I stop you there? Can I stop you there? I want to grab some of the stuff that you said, and I want to, one of the things that we have to really be aware of in this healing journey when we're doing this is, number one, to in our healing journey, and I use this, all of you probably, or some of you have heard of the 4 agreements, right? Okay, the first rule is do not take things personally, and that's really tough, because in your situation, it's a long family generational story. So it's not going to happen overnight, but at least keep it up there on the mantle, that if it didn't happen to you, it might happen to someone else. So as much as possible, as the human beings within the capability that we have, is trying not to take things personal. The second thing, what's the second agreement? Does anybody remember?
Always do your best.
What?
Always do your best.
Always do your best. Always do your best. When my mom was drunk, she was doing her best at that point. That's all she could do. She was a survivor of boarding school. She'd been hurt. That's the best that she could do. So in your situation, that's the best that relative is doing. So we just accept, and it's a hero's journey. In a sacred circle, nobody is less than or greater than. And so the third thing is you can't make assumptions. Do not make assumptions. We don't know what is going on underneath. And one of the biggest ones is that fear of the ordinary, because since we've never talked about it, how do we know what's going to happen? We have no clue. The fourth agreement is,
Be truthful with your word.
what is it?
Be truthful with your word.
Okay, be impeccable to your word, or truthful. So I know that if I say that I'm going to do something, I'm still doing the best that you did. In your situation, when you went to smudge, you were doing the best that you could. You have no control over the rest of the universe. You just did your part, so you walk away. You can't control who smudges. You can't control what happens after that. You can't control people, places, or things. And you did your best as a relative, so let's just leave it there. The other part that I want to mention, that I'm really glad you brought this up, because I forgot to.
That's what I was going to say, that I got to the point where I had to stop it. It hurt me so emotionally. And that's when I got to this.
You accepted.
And the last time I saw her, she came up to my stand and said, "Hi, cuz, how are you?" And it shocked me. I said, "Hi, I'm fine." But I looked at her and I couldn't. I don't know if she heard what my thoughts and something passed on what I had said, but it changed.
Okay.
And that's where we are.
Acceptance. Good.
Yeah,
Good.
and it was hard. It was very hard.
And that's why I said it's the hero's journey. Because the behavior that she just pointed out a little bit ago, what happens when we've been hurt, we actually spiritually and physically will form a crust around our body. And you hear it in people who have red rage. It's like, what are you looking at? You're my relative? Is that language of, I have a little niece that really has come out of that when she was a teenager. Her name is Melody. Whenever I'd see her, I'd say, "Hello, Melody." "What?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm just saying good morning, soul." And I said, "When you get married, you can say, 'I do.'" So we incorporate that. Besides what the story is, it's in our language, and it's scary to each other. So we never, that big divide is there. Another story, and I think I told you this last time, but I'll tell it again because it's a real teaching one. And the teaching comes from two little girls. I go up to Lakota Nation Invitational. It's a time when all the basketball teams come into Rapid City. All the Indians come to shop, and everybody used to know each other. So I'm doing workshops, and I walk up to the Civic Center, and I'm struggling with my handouts, and I get in the elevator, and these two little tough girls come in with that language of rage, real tough. They kind of step into the elevator, so I'm grandma now, so I can't be talking like that. And so they hop in, and I say, "Good morning, girls." And one of them looks at me, she goes, "Like, real tough." Even her little body, just standing there like that. Hi. And then I looked at the other one and I said, "Where are you girls from?" "I'm rich." And my response was yours. It was like, "Oh, not that tough." And I went like this, "Not that tough." And then when I did that, she went like this. The little girl came out. She kind of went like that and she smiled. And then it was like, "Oh no," she saw me and she went like this. She said, "Whatever." And I said, "Well, you girls have a good day, okay?" And they said, "Yeah." And then they flounced out, but you can feel that crust, that hardens. And so we're really scary towards each other. And so the end of the story, 2 days later, I'm leaving to go back out, getting out of the hotel, and I'm going to my car in the parking lot, and I hear these two little voices. They don't sound like mean girls from Pine Ridge. One of them says, "Faith," and I turned around and I saw them coming. And I thought, they must have been in my workshop and they found out who I was. And one of them said, "Faith," and I said, "Yeah." And I turned around and they said, "Do you need help?" They didn't sound like tough girls, they sounded like little girls. And they came up, I said, "Yeah, I need help." So they scooped me up, they took all of my stuff to the car, they packed me in there, and they said, "You gonna be all right?" I said, "Yeah." Now imagine if I would have reciprocated. And I would have said, "Gee, not that unfriendly." Or if I would have said, "Not that mean." then it would never have ended. So our role in the community is to put that mirror up to examine our own language, because we're probably reflecting that too. And so it's scary, it's like, I don't know if I can, it's scary. Did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to share something that I'm thinking about is also that thank you for what you shared. I'm thinking a lot about, there's been a lot of sexual trauma in my family, a lot of incest, and just the importance of being believed, you know, and I'm really grateful for what you're sharing because it's just really affirming that we need spaces to come and be believed or share our stories and have someone understand or give us permission to feel what we're feeling and say, yeah, I bet you're angry. Or, for example, with incest, it's extremely common where you're not believed, you know, and many times, for example, your primary caretaker doesn't know how to say, turn to the person who created that wound and dispel them or protect their children, and just how much harm can come when you're not acknowledged or your wound isn't accepted. Yeah. Someone recently told me that that's what creates a lot of psychosis or crazy making is when your wound isn't believed or acknowledged. So thank you for creating that space.
Yes. And to go a step further, I talked to a little girl, she wasn't little, she was like 14, and she had been raped. And I said, we need to tell. And she said, you know what the worst thing beyond rape is? And I said, what? What could be worse? And she said, that somebody wouldn't believe you.
Yeah.
She said, that's worse. So why would I tell? She said, what if they don't believe me? That's worse. It's like they gave me the permission to do that. So that there's really, the truth telling is really important. The other thing that you touched on is that we have to create safe places, and we can do that. We have complete control and power over being nice to somebody. We don't have to be mean. We don't have to be cruel. And we have, when our healers, when we go into ceremony, I know that we have rattles, when we work on people, we'll take that rattle, go like that, and that's what we're doing, is we're breaking through that trust, that exterior that has been put there because you've been hurt, and inverted in those little girls' voices. So that's why we do that, and then massage does that. It's like it's breaking through all of that injury and that hurt, and then some people will cry when they're working on your body because you're hearing them. So anyhow, any way that you can do that, and I'm a member of the Council of Elders for ACES, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. When the students come together, they call it Safe Camp. And I thought, what a neat concept. We need safe camps in order to be able to, we don't need the backstabbing, we don't need the gossip. I mean, life is short. So, and we don't, above all, I'm a reader of body language big time, and I know my body language shows, but we have very violent body language. You can see it immediately. Some of you are head nodders, and of course, if you go like that, that's good because it gives me direction. Some of you, without even realizing it, you'll go. I don't like that. And then, of course, the physical communication when you're intending on hurting somebody. You can be in a crowd of people. It could be a meeting. This person over here is going to look at this person over here because they don't like what this one is saying. They're going to look over there and they'll go. And they're going to go. Nobody even said anything. They've got this thing going on to get this person here. Just think how powerful that is. It's really neat, and it's just like, it creates tyrants. And we have there's a part of all of us that is a tyrant. When we've been injured, we know how to hurt other people. It gives us experience. Show the hand. Yeah.
I wanted to say, back to being 2 years old, and when you're adopted out or you're taken in by other people who raise you, whether you're a foster child or in that particular situation, your parents don't raise you. There's a couple feelings that come up. That number one, you're not loved. Number two, no one cares. And number three, who gives a damn? And when you're in that situation and you're an unwanted child, you tend to take it out on yourself because you're unworthy of love. So, in my situation, rather than go to drugs or alcohol, although in the beginning I started playing with that, I was almost really successful in committing suicide, but did not succeed. But many people commit suicide in different ways. They go to drugs, they go to alcohol, and that becomes a lifestyle for them of self-destruction because they don't feel lovable, they don't feel worthy, they feel that no one cares. And I feel that they experience what I experienced at that young age.
And that's why those spirits need to be retrieved, because it's never too late to be a beloved child. In our culture, we always have beloved children. And so we have to recreate it even when you're a grown woman, that we have to treat each other accordingly. Otherwise, it's that the biggest single thing is that we have a sense of unworthiness, which you explained wonderfully. I remember we were doing the coming of age ceremony, and this little girl wanted her mom there so bad. She kept saying, Auntie Faith, please go get her. And so I'd go into town and I'd say, would you please come out? She wants you at the ceremony. She said, no, I can't go, I can't go. And then pretty soon she would, it's a 4-day ceremony, by the 3rd day she wouldn't answer the door. So the ceremony went through, the little girl didn't have her mom there, and she was wonderful, she did well at the ceremony. Later on, I saw the mom in town, and I said, how come you didn't come? I'm just curious. And she said, oh, Faith, she said, I'm too evil. She said, you don't know the things that I've done. I don't belong in a beautiful ceremony like that. But that's that root of unworthiness that he's talking about. Somebody injured her, so she took on the addiction, and she was in prostitution and other stuff. But that was irrelevant. It was back to what happened back then. And so she felt like she was not good. So if in that trauma response over here, that's all over here on the left side. Because the main goal of our safe camps a long time ago was to create beloved children. And again, it's never too late to be a beloved child. We have to be able to do that. Could you go to that next slide and then we'll close up for the morning? The ways of healing native style. I saw some of your spirits shake this morning, and that's good. Because if they don't shake, then that trust is too hard to penetrate. I've seen some of you have that mean girl look. It's like, I'm gonna pay attention. But that's just the coping. That's how I survived. But over here, when your spirit starts to shake, that's when the tears come, and your spirit is alive. It's still there. It may not be standing in full spirit, but that's what your work is. To look in that trauma response, in that pile over here, what parts of myself that have I left behind? And maybe to get help, if you can't, for me, I went to codependency treatment. I just could not. I was over controlling my children. I was just like paranoid that they couldn't figure out things themselves. How disrespectful to do everything for your children. It doesn't respect them. And so I had to go to treatment. I needed help. It helped me define boundaries for me. And so sometimes you need help. It's never too late to seek that. And then in discussing, you can probably feel some of those tears coming up this morning, but that's good. And when that happens, your body is having a ceremony with itself. Being able to release some of it. But dancing, sweating, singing, crying, talking, laughing, we're real good at that. As long as it's not, sometimes when we've had a lot of trauma, we clown. When I'm clowning, I'm not even feeling it. It's like I'll clown so I don't have to look at what's really beneath it. If I can just laugh you off, I don't have to do anything. Some of us have never, yeah.
I'm a #1 clown. But as you're talking about that trauma stuff, I'm sitting back here. I have what's called trichomoniasia, which is a hair pulling.
Okay.
And I was told yesterday, which I just found out, it's abuse, like cutting.
Okay.
And so I'm sitting back here trying to pull my hair out because of all that trauma you're talking
Okay.
about. But I'm not sure what stage I'm at because I'm like I've been through rehab so many times, but I don't understand this time. Why
Yeah.
am I, I thought I got released a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
But I was just talking to my counselor about this kind of clowning around stuff, and I also stood up in front of the group and asked them to help me get through it more, because I don't like that part about me.
yeah,
Because after I'm done, I was probably disrespectful to an elder that was there, or maybe somebody that was praying silent. I don't know, that's selfishness, I guess. I don't know what I was doing, but now
and
that you just said
some of
it.
it could be forgiveness, because when we've had so many traumas and addictions have come in, and that unworthiness that she talked about, it's like, oh my gosh, my whole life is so screwed up, but it's okay, you're still a good person. And so part of that is forgiving myself for what I went through, because it was beyond my control.
Yeah. And then I can't even get emotional. I got this hard, just, I hear what I feel it.
Yeah,
I don't even know if I feel it. It's just, I just.
it's
cry a
real
lot.
distant.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like, you talk about the spirit being gone. I know mine is gone.
Okay.
But I came here, so it's reviving, I
Yeah.
feel.
Well,
But,
good.
it's
Good.
just like a little anxiety. I don't know, something's going on, to where I'm hard.
Yeah,
I think you're just the opposite, completely warm and adorable and cute.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just like, but when I'm sitting here, like you said, you don't see the outside, you don't see the inside.
yeah,
It's crying inside, but I can't bring it out.
yeah, but above all, you're a good person, and it's scary to be told that.
Yeah.
It's really scary. Yeah, thank you. Well, we're at 12:30, I was supposed to stop a half hour ago. Okay, that's where you've had some, little bit of resolution. And it's like, okay, this thing happened, and I feel really ugly, or I feel shitty, or whatever, but it happened, and now I'm gonna go forward. I'm gonna try it out. And I'm gonna go ahead and go out in the public. Maybe it's after someone dies. Maybe it's Christmas. Maybe you didn't put the tree up after Mom was gone. And so it's like, well, I don't have to punish the grandchildren. So I'm gonna have a tree this year. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're gonna move to acceptance. Yeah, it's like Mom is gone. Mom is really gone. And then over here, just be aware that this stage between depression and testing is where suicides happen. Because you think that things have gotten better, but they have made a plan. They are moving on. But it's not. So that's kind of a risky area, but that's pretty rare. That's not always. Yes,
Oh, I just want to know where mine was. I don't know.
I can visit with you individually.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, immobilization is when I freeze and I have if I have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is the disorder that happens in immobilization where I shut all feelings off and my voice is real flat, monotone, I don't really care, you can't make me cry, I don't give a damn, whatever, it's just like that all the way across. Wow. And you're not gonna get through to me because I don't even care. Yeah, a lot. I think mostly on the left side, because your spirit is not knowing where to go. The left side is where it's real dark. You're not, and it's normal though to go through it. It's a grieving cycle. You first experienced it when you lost a pet. If you had a pet when you were little. And kids are really resilient. When you lose your pet, the parents are just having major trauma and they're saying, we're never going to have a cat again. And then by the third day, Mom, can I have another kitty? You've already accepted that that cat died. And so kids are very resilient if they're allowed to. It's when, don't be crying. You know what you're crying about. Then we're preventing them from going through that cycle. It's when we push it down. Okay, that makes sense?
No, or if you keep hearing, we're
It's like mom's scared we're gonna, yeah. It's just being resilient and in life things happen. They do happen and in the end, none of us are getting out of here alive. Okay, do you have a prayer?